Hello everyone, my name is Mark Anthony Campos Villarreal and I present to you the one-dimensional dilemma. This is a lecture that I have adapted from an essay that I wrote for one of my classes called The Novel, and I hope you enjoy what I have to share with you. So, what is my purpose in giving this lecture to you guys today? The world that we live in is complex and ambiguous, and it constantly challenges us to make sense of it. We accomplish this through lived experience, but there are limits to this lived experience. I believe that a consequence of lived experience is that it conjures one-dimensional thought. Now, you may be asking, what do I mean by one-dimensional thought? What I mean by that is that we tend to focus on an understanding that makes the most sense to us and offers us the most security. Other forms of reasoning and other points of view surrounding a specific situation are often overlooked in favor of our security. We don't like to be wrong, and we often throw ourselves into false dilemmas. Either I am right or I am wrong, and we don't like to be wrong. I'm sure we've all seen this image here before. It is two people arguing about what they see. Now, as we can clearly see, neither of them are wrong. If we look at it from the perspective of the man on the right, we will see a 9, but if we look at it on the other perspective, we will see a 6. The issue here is that they fail to see the other's point of view. If the man on the left were to move to the position of the man on the right, then he would see what the other man was seeing and vice versa. One-dimensional thought limits our perceptions. Prejudice, hatred, oppression, and division could be attributed to one-dimensional thought. The purpose of this lecture is to challenge the confines of one-dimensional thought. My intended outcome is that the listeners of this lecture learn to take in various points of views of any given situation and synthesize them into a more comprehensive and dimensional understanding. Now, how could we accomplish this? I believe that the critical analysis of literature could be a tool in attaining a more comprehensive and dimensional thought. Now, you may be asking yourself, how is this possible? Isn't literature just a way to tell stories? I believe that apart from literature, a more comprehensive and dimensional thought cannot be accomplished with face-to-face interactions because emotions, for the most part, get in the way. I know that this isn't the case for everyone, but imagine you're sharing your opinions at Thanksgiving dinner with somebody that does not have the same views as you. It's not pretty. There is anger and other emotions that are thrown around, but this cannot be done with a book. You can be angry at a book, I understand that, but it's a one-way communication. The book isn't going to throw back any anger. The book still stands with its intended purpose, and you will still stand there wondering how you can prove the book wrong. Lord knows how frustrated I was when I read Plato's Republic for the first time, and I had my fair share of anger towards that book. So, why literature? Literature is known to have lasting intellectual value that transmits culture and explores complex ideas and emotion. The beauty of this is that it challenges an individual's set morals and beliefs and actively engages them into a conversation. So, what does this mean? I have spent some time talking about one-dimensional thought and how other perceptions can provide a more comprehensive and dimensional thought. But what does this mean? I did not know how to articulate this properly. I am an undergraduate student after all. So I decided to provide you with an example that will hopefully illustrate what it is that I'm trying to communicate to you. And I titled this slide Dimensional Figures. Here in this image, we have an example of different dimensions of shape, and I want each of these dimensions to represent forms of thought. So, the one dimension in this figure is meant to represent an individual set of opinions, reasoning, and thought. So this would be like me sharing my own opinions without considering anybody else. It's just one-sided. There's not much that we can make out of this because it is one-sided and limited to one party. Now, if we move on to the two-dimensional figure, which is the square, this is meant to represent two parties, so two sides of a story, both A and B. These are two perceptions of thought coming together to form a broader understanding of the situation. And when we move to the third dimensional figure, this is meant to represent the comprehensive dimensional thought that I mentioned earlier. Here we have taken both parties' perceptions and synthesized them into an accurate representation of what the situation was. Now, you may or may not still be confused. So I came up with an example that might help clarify any confusion. It's called The Breakup of Alex and Mariah. And so we have the story of them, and I'm first going to give Alex's account, and then I'm going to give Mariah's account. Both of these accounts are meant to represent the one-dimensional thought because they're coming from the individual themselves. So Alex's version of why they broke up. From Alex's perspective, the breakup happened because Mariah stopped caring. He says Mariah became distant. She didn't seem excited to spend time together. She often canceled plans or said she was tired. When Alex tried to talk about the relationship, Mariah seemed annoyed. He felt he was the only one putting in effort. Alex's conclusion, Mariah checked out emotionally. I tried to fix things, but she didn't care anymore. So that's his version of what happened, the one dimension. Now, we move on to the next one-dimensional thought, which is Mariah's version of why they broke up. Mariah tells a very different story. In her view, the breakup happened because Alex didn't listen and kept dismissing her concerns. She says Alex was always busy and distracted. When she tried to express her needs, he minimized them. She felt like Alex only reacted when she finally got frustrated. She canceled plans because she was overwhelmed emotionally, not because she didn't care. She felt unseen and unheard for months. Mariah's conclusion? I tried to communicate, but Alex never took my feelings seriously. I became distant because I was exhausted. So now we've seen both versions of this one-dimensional thought. The second dimensional thought comes into play when both Mariah and Alex share their versions of the story with a third party. And here is what the third party observes. When a neutral friend, counselor, or outsider listens to both sides, a bigger picture emerges. Alex wasn't wrong. He did feel abandoned. Mariah's growing emotional distance made him feel like the relationship was slipping away and he did not understand why. Mariah wasn't wrong. She did try to communicate, but her communication was subtle and Alex didn't recognize it was a warning until the damage was already done. The real issue was the cycle. Mariah felt unheard. She withdrew emotionally. Alex sensed the withdrawal. He became anxious and clingy. Mariah felt even more overwhelmed. She pulled back further. Alex interpreted that as confirmation that she didn't care. Neither party fully understood the other's emotional needs, leading to escalating misrepresentations. So, the third party takes these thoughts and he forms the third dimensional thought, which is the final form, and it's the actual representation of the situation. So, the actual reason for the breakup. According to the third party's analysis, the breakup wasn't caused by one person's neglect or the other's sensitivity. It was caused by a communication gap where Mariah communicated indirectly. Alex needed clear and direct communication. Both interpreted the other's behavior through their own fears. So the actual cause wasn't Mariah stopped caring or Alex never listened, but the interaction between their styles and assumptions. So there you go. I hope that this cleared up any confusion, and we will next be moving on to how literature can help us accomplish this. So my inspiration for this lecture was Nick Sasonis' dissertation titled Unflattening. And in this dissertation, Sasonis argues that an overemphasis on standardized assessment sacrifices a nimbleness of mind for an educational system ordered around a limited notion of intelligence, in the process quite literally narrowing students' ways of seeing, thereby constraining their ways of thinking. What Sasonis is trying to communicate through this quote is that standardization conditions an individual to automatically subscribe to any given notion without any form of challenge or resistance to the idea being given. It is nothing more than a fact, and it is treated as such. The danger in this conditioning is that it will bleed into all aspects of an individual's life to the point that the world will appear to be merely black and white. He goes on further to state, within this space between disciplines, their interplay and overlap facilitate the emergence of new perspectives. By integrating multiple views, we can create a more comprehensive and dimensional picture. What Sosanis is doing in this quote is he's using human stereoscopic vision as an illustration. Human stereoscopic vision helps us see the whole picture by giving us depth, volume, and multidimensional understanding of what's in front of us, something that one eye alone cannot provide, or in this case, one form of thought. So Sosanis believes that this is a property of graphic novels / comics, but I believe that this can be applied to literature as well. It is the idea of thoughts coming together to challenge one-dimensional thought that matters here, and I believe that literature does this too. I believe that Sosanis would agree with me. Okay, so the first work of the literature that we're going to be looking at is titled Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. So, for those unfamiliar with Gilead, the novel is presented through the reflective narrative of John Ames, who is writing a letter to his son due to his impending death. John Ames' hope for this letter is to provide his son with insight of who he was as a person when he was alive. So, how is one-dimensional thought represented in Gilead? I believe that it is represented through the relationship that John Ames has with Bowen. The relationship is best described as fraction. So, the first sign or the first hint of a fractured relationship between John and Bowen happens during John's reflective dialogue with himself after a conversation that he had with Bowen's sister. And here is the quote. I suppose he'll appear sooner or later. I don't know how one boy could have caused so much disappointment without ever giving anyone any grounds for hope. And this reflective dialogue is important for the reader because it epitomizes the prejudice that John Ames has against Bowen. I believe this is further supported with the following quote. My impulse is strong to warn you against John Ames Bowen. Now, this was a piece where he was considering telling his son to watch out for the guy that was coming around the house, which was John Ames Bowen. So, what happens after that reflective dialogue? I believe that Bowen is seeking guidance and reconciliation, but John refuses to see it that way. Our first glimpse at Bowen seeking reconciliation is during a conversation that he has with John concerning the topic of predestination. The purpose behind this question has not yet been made explicit, but the dialogue between the characters hints that this is a personal matter to Bowen. Yet John decides to see it as Bowen instigating him, or rather, he wants to believe that Bowen is trying to make a fool of him. And I think this is best captured in this quote. I felt Bowen was deviling me, you see. What makes it seem like this is a personal issue for Bowen is when he says, well, actually, I do believe I have a history with it. I have had reason to wonder fairly often about it. I hope you would instruct me a little. Fortunately, John does very little to answer Bowen's question, and he comes off rather passive-aggressive. John's prejudice got the better of him, and this unfortunately hindered him from seeing a man in desperate need of reassurance. After their interaction, John's wife made it a point to reprimand his behavior. He was only asking a question, which was almost a rebuke coming from her. Then after we walked a little further, she said, maybe some people are not comfortable with themselves. This is much like the Alex and Mariah example that I gave you earlier, but it is reflected in a different context. This is the potentiality of one-dimensional thought. It hinders an individual from addressing a situation in the proper way. How many relationship failures have been a victim of this? If we could simply look past our own understanding, that we can build deeper meaningful bonds with those around us. There is always two sides to the story. Obviously, this is a more secluded and small problem. Earlier in our conversation, I made it seem like this was a universal issue that will have severe ramifications. Well, what if I move away from interpersonal relationships to communal relationships? So, The next piece of literature that I like to look at is titled Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. And before I get started, I'd like to give a shout out to my professor, Dr. Daniel Larson. As I mentioned earlier, I adopted this lecture from an essay that I wrote, and he was the one that actually graded it. And I made some alterations to it based on his recommendations. At first, I initially focused on Kathy's relationship with her friends, and then I realized that hey, this is pretty similar to the interpersonal relationship that was represented in Gilead, and so I wanted to represent something bigger. And so I was thinking, well, why not focus on society as a whole? So let's get into it. So, so yeah, here we go. What if society has fallen victim to the oppression of one-dimensional thought? Now, for those unfamiliar with Never Let Me Go, it follows a girl named Kathy who looks back on her childhood at Hailsham, which is a boarding school in England. With her friends Ruth and Tommy, Kathy grows up believing they are special, encouraged to create art and maintain good health. As they mature, the truth of their existence slowly becomes clear. They are clones, raised for the sole purpose of donating their organs to extend the lives of others. I think it's very important that we pay attention to that fact that they are clones that are raised for the sole purpose of donating their organs. As the story progresses, we see that Kathy and all the other clones are just as human as the ones that created them. And I think for Kathy, so we're going to focus on the humanity piece of it first. And I think for Kathy, this is best exemplified in two instances. So the first occurs when Kathy was having issues with her best friend Ruth. So Ruth had just kicked Kathy out of a group that they were a part of over petty reasons. I believe it was over a chess game. And Kathy was looking for a way to even the score. So an incident came up when Ruth deliberately placed out a pencil case in front of the class so that someone could comment on it. When she got the comment, she made it seem like she got it from a guardian. A guardian is what they called their teachers, and Ruth doing this was meant to show that this guardian favored her. And Kathy knew that this was a lie, so when Kathy saw this, she saw it as an opportunity to expose Ruth. She did some digging and she found out that Ruth actually purchased the pencil case at these things that they called the sales. And so it never was a gift from the guardian. And so Kathy made it a point to expose Ruth in front of the whole class, and she did, which made Ruth extremely embarrassed. And this is the outcome of that interaction. So this is Kathy talking about it. It says, and suddenly my behavior seemed to me utterly baffling. All this effort, all this planning just to upset my dearest friend. I now felt awful, and I was confused. So this quote, I believe that it is showcasing deep emotional understanding and selflessness. It is a human characteristic, and it shows that she is much more than just a consumable. Now, the second scene happens when Kathy thinks she's alone listening to her favorite song. Kathy describes how she used to listen to a song from her favorite cassette tape, Songs After Dark by Judy Bridgewater. One track, Never Let Me Go, moved her deeply. Whenever she played it alone in her dorm room, she would hold an imaginary baby in her arms and sway gently, pretending the song was a mother begging not to lose her child. And when she's listening to this song, there's an instant where she notices somebody in a doorway. And here's the quote for that. So it says, the song was almost over when something made me realize I wasn't alone. And I opened my eyes to find myself staring at Madame framed in the doorway. And the odd thing was, she was crying. So, my first read through of this was a bit confusing. I had no idea why Madame was crying until later in the story. Madame explains exactly why she was crying, and I think I have the quote. Yes, so this is Madame saying why she was crying when she saw Kathy. So she said, "I saw something else. I saw a new world coming rapidly, a harsh, cruel world, and I saw a little girl." Madame was crying because in this moment she was not seeing a clone, she was seeing a human, and it hurt her knowing that soon this girl was going to fall victim to the world, which in this case means that somewhere along the line, she was just going to be harvested for her organs, and that was going to be it. That's her only purpose. Nobody else cared to see that Kathy herself was a person with a soul. So, now to get back on track, how is one-dimensional thought shown in this book? Okay, so the one-dimensional thought is shown in this novel with the fact that Kathy and her peers are only seen as consumables, meant to help others live longer by using their organs. We have already established that they are just like humans and share the same emotional bonds and feelings as humans. We even have an actual human that saw Kathy as a little girl and wept for her because she knew that the world would not see her the same way. And here are a few examples of how the world in this book sees the clones. We have our first quote here. Says, "We took away your art because we thought it would reveal your souls, or to put it more finely, we did it to prove you had souls at all." And so, you know, art is a way of expression, and it tells a story about the person. And when they were kids at the school Hellsham, they would make projects, and at the end of I think it was like randomly, Madame would come and collect all the art and take it, and the kids would say like, "Oh, it's going to the gallery." Well, the gallery was an actual thing, and it was meant to showcase to the world that these clones are human as well, that they have souls, that they have deep, deep emotional connections, and all that. Now, here's the next quote. "Most importantly, we demonstrated to the world that if students were reared in humane, cultivated environments, it was possible for them to grow to be as sensitive and intelligent as any ordinary human being. Before that, all clones, or students as we prefer to call you, existed only to supply medical science." So, the one dimensional thought, which is the people only choosing to see the clones as clones, prevented the people of this society to see past a consumable good that they relied on. That's all they wanted to see, and it led to the oppression of the clones. And we have seen examples of this in our real world. We have seen it with the enslavement of the African Americans, and we also seen it with Nazi Germany and gathering all the Jews together. As we can see, this move far beyond the interpersonal relationship that was demonstrated in Gilead, and it now showcases the ramifications that one-dimensional thought can have if society shares that same thought. In this case, it'd be the oppression of a people. Okay, so the last piece of literature that we would be looking at is titled "The Road" by Cormac McCarthy. And again, I'd like to give a shout out to my professor, Dr. Daniel Larson. Um, so originally, my last book was titled "The Lost Children Archive," but when I started tweaking "Never Let Me Go," I realized that the Lost Children Archive was also a societal issue. And what I wanted to do with my lecture was start from something small to the bigger. So interpersonal relationship to community to global. And I believe that the road covers that way more effectively than the Lost Children Archive could have. And also, my professor made the comment on my essay, "Hey, isn't this also the plot for The Road?" And you know what? The dude saved me. This actually fit a lot better for what I was trying to do. So, what if the world has fallen victim to the one-dimensional dilemma? So, for those unfamiliar with the road follows a father and his young son traveling through a bleak, post-apocalyptic world after an unspecified global catastrophe. The landscape is covered in ash, the sky is darkened, and almost all plant and animal life has vanished. With limited food and constant danger and harsh weather, survival becomes a daily struggle. So, being in a post apocalyptic world, there is the obvious struggle of resources. Often, this results in survival of the fittest. Now, how is this handled in the book? So, in order for this to fit within the narrative of my argument, I will be focusing on the survival of the fittest claim that I made. The way that the story demonstrates this fits perfectly with the one-dimensional dilemma that I'm trying to structure. I do want to note, however, that this is not the main point of the book, and that I highly recommend that you go out and read this book for yourself. It is such a great read. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it the first read through that I did, and this also goes for all the other books, Gilead and Never Let Me Go. Gilead is just beautiful the way the story ends. I won't tell you how it ends because I really do want you to read the book. But my absolute favorite has to be Never Let Me Go. Um, I do plan on rereading that book soon. It's just absolutely beautiful. So, getting back on track. So, how is survival of the fittest a one-dimensional dilemma? Well, I believe that it is because it does not conform to any sets of morals. The way that this is demonstrated in the road is through cannibalism. There are other ways that this is demonstrated, but cannibalism is the biggest one. Now, I don't think I need to go into depth on how this is a one-dimensional thought. The person committing the act has obviously gave up all sense of morals and does not see the intrinsic value of the other person. Their only goal is survival. And so for the remainder of this lecture, we will be looking at a few quotes about the cannibalism and how they have just given up any form of reasoning just for survival. So, the first quote is, "Then he went back. There was nothing there. Dried blood, dark in the leaves. Coming back, he found the bones and the skin piled together with rocks over them. They looked to have been boiled." So what happened here was a group of armed men in a truck encounters the boy and the man on the road, and one of the guys ends up finding them and grabs the little boy. And in order to protect the little boy, the dad has to shoot the man, and he just leaves him there to bleed out. And they go, the son and the father just go into hiding. And when late at night, when the father decides to go back to get his things, that's where he sees this. So the group of men that the guy was a part of found him dead, and instead of providing medical aid or giving him a proper burial like a normal person would, they decided to just eat him, which is insane. Now we get to one of the craziest parts of the book. Well, so the quote goes, "Huddled against the back wall were naked people, male and female, all trying to hide, shielding their faces with their hands. On the mattress lay a man with his legs gone to the hip, and the stumps of them blackened and burnt." So what is happening in this quote is the father and the son are trying to find some food to help him get to where they're trying to go, because like I said, resources are scarce in this world. And they end up finding this house, and they find I think it's like a basement door with a padlock on it. And numerous times the boy is telling his dad, "Hey, don't open that. I don't want to go down there." But the dad chooses not to listen to the boy. He's like, "Hey, like we need to get food. We need to survive." And they end up opening the basement door. And when they go in, that's when this all happens. And so it clearly shows that whoever did this to them did not care about the people at all. Like, you would think that in a post-apocalyptic world we would find a way to restructure society, but nah, not on the road. The road is just like, you know what, you look delicious, why don't you come with me and help me survive instead. So after the encounter with the dead people, or not the dead people, but the people that are being held hostage in the basement, we get this quote from the boy: "They're going to kill those people, aren't they? Why do we have to do that? Why do they have to do that? I'm sorry. They're going to eat them, aren't they? And we couldn't help them because then they eat us too." And I think this is absolutely sad because, you know, I'd like to believe that if we were in this situation, we'd like to um, help those that were being eaten. But it's obvious why they can't do that in the story, because if they help them, then they put themselves in danger of being eaten too. Like, they would not care that the person had a little boy with them. They would just say like, "Hey, this is more food for us. That's even better." And you might think that this is the craziest thing that happens in this book, but um, look at this quote right here. A wind had begun to trouble the top of the spire, and the smoke sifted so they could smell it. They could smell something cooking. What the boy had seen was a charred human infant, headless and gutted, and blackening on the spit. So this is by far the craziest thing that has happened on the road. So previous to this, I think they're on top of a mountain, and they see a group of people walking across a bridge, and one of the persons in that group happens to be a pregnant woman, and I forget why it is that they decide to go look for these group of people, but when they do, they realize that the woman actually gave birth. And instead of caring for the baby, they cook the baby. I, I don't think I need to argue the one dimensional dilemma here. It is pretty clear that they've given up all form of reasoning in favor of survival. So, we finally made it to the end, and I think for those of you watching, I thank you for making it to this point. It really means a lot to me, and you know, I really hope that I was able to communicate something to you that will stay with you. So, a one dimensional dilemma. We've already talked about how it's just a set of one dimensional thought, how we only choose to accept things that give us security, but but through the examples that are given to you through literature, we can see the ramifications that it can have. In Gilead, we saw that it prohibits interpersonal relationships. In Never Let Me Go, we see how it could be used as an oppression of a people. And on the road, we can see how this could be a global issue when you just trade all sets of morals and beliefs for one set of belief, which is survival. How everything is just thrown out the window for one basic goal. And I hope you can see just how dangerous this is, and I hope that in the future, if you ever encounter a situation, you choose to see as many points of views of that situation as you can. So, thank you again. My name is Mark Anthony Campos Villarreal, and this is the One Dimensional Dilemma. Oh, and before I go, oh, not that. So, before I go, this is what I wanted to show you guys. It is my works cited page. Once again, thank you all for sticking around for up until this point, and I hope that you have a great day.